Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to your World Cup Daily. I'm Dave Hendrick and I'm using my phone because apparently it's too cold for the internet in my house to work properly. So apologies if the sound is a bit ropey, but we are making do. I am joined by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Currently Googling what's Qatari for. It's fucking Baltic, mate.
Yes, it is absolutely horrendous. I'm not sure what's happened, but I know that I'm blaming Guy for sending his summer weather over to us for the winter, or in your case, down to you for winter. It is incredibly cold. I think it's -4 or -5 at the moment, which isn't fun, and it's playing havoc with my internet, which obviously, you know how my patience works. It's not a good thing.
No, I would imagine it started thin and, ran out after about 1 millimetre or second, whichever came first.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. So we have reached the World Cup semi-final stage, and 4 teams remain. Croatia, Argentina, Morocco, France. On this podcast, we will preview Croatia, Argentina, but before we do that, what I wanted to do was I want to talk to you about England and England's exit from the competition at the hands of France. Let's start with that game, because obviously you were working when myself and Guy did the post-match. What did you think of the game?
I thought this was actually one of very few matches at the tournament where it's quite visible that it's two relatively high-class teams in terms of the individual players and the standard that they're all playing at. We've had some good games at the World Cup, don't get me wrong, but I think this was one of the few that there have been where you can see that there are two across the board fairly talented teams up against each other. I think that was quite a notable standout for me early on in terms of build-up play and how the teams approached it, that kind of thing. From an England perspective first, I don't really think that there was too much more they could do to elevate the performance level. I think they played as well as they could. I think they were good at the match of France at the very least. Kind of went as you would expect if this was like two very big clubs playing each other, where essentially across the board, when they're two well-matched teams, the weak links ultimately will cost you very, very slightly. And sometimes you need a bit of fortune, obviously. Sometimes very small details will decide whether the outcome is a win for one or the other, even when almost the same things happen across the board for both. But basically, England were a little bit lacking in that defensive triangle. The centre-backs and the goalkeeper, I think, if you replace them with France's, for example, England probably win that match. Not too much in it, but ultimately not quite enough at the back, I think.
I would say quite the opposite, because I thought the big weakness for France, which you actually highlighted before the game, was Dejan Upamecano, who I thought was absolutely dreadful.
Oh, yeah, on an individual level. I just mean like quality-wise across the board. I think if you take the average performance out of those two and replace the average performance with Maguire and Stones, you'll probably get a...
That's fair. Yeah, that is fair. I thought England's big issue, though, was they simply just didn't create anything. Like, they had one good open play chance. It came from a dreadful error by Upamecano, who got himself turned very easily by Harry Kane. And aside from that, you had 2 penalties. You had 2 Harry Maguire headers, one from a Henderson free kick, one from a corner, where I don't think he realised he had an open goal to head at. A half chance for Bellingham, and a couple of long-range dribblers from Kane. And that was kind of it. Whereas you look at France, and despite the fact that they played quite poorly on the day, both their goals came from open play. Giroud missed a sitter. Rabiot had a good chance. Dembele had the chance of the game when Mbappe destroyed Walker, cut it back. Giroud stepped over it, and all Mbappe had to do was hit it. But I don't think he knew it was coming to him. It just felt to me like England's lack of natural creativity in the team came back to hurt them. And, they've got two, I would class, world-class creators. Now, I'm not saying one of them is a world-class player, but I think he's a world-class creator in James Maddison, world-class creator, not a world-class player, but creator, and Trent, undeniably world-class creator and player, and neither of them saw a minute of this game.
Yeah, I don't think that was a massive surprise. They were never going to play in this game. It was always going to be the slightly on the fringe of the first team players who would turn to off the bench. I mean, like you mentioned, there were long range shots and set pieces and stuff. England had more efforts, I would class them as, rather than chances, than they normally would do in a big game or a game of this magnitude. That's what I would say. You would not normally have, I think there was a Kane one from quite a long way out. Henderson had a dig. Saka, I think, had one from outside the box first half as well. There were more of these types of shots than you would normally get from England in a game of this magnitude, which I do think is a step forward, a step in the right direction, a show of the sort of the positive intent and the fact that they felt comfortable enough, I think, and emboldened enough to take on those chances or half chances sometimes. Normally it wouldn't be. It would be a lot safer. It would be play it across again and try to work room for a cross, or, basically trying not to lose the ball. And I think that was quite a notable step forward for England. And kind of by the same token, I think the fact that they clearly did feel at least on a par with France probably makes the fact that they still lost even worse, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so. And by the magic of technology, I am sounding better, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes it so disappointing for England, though, is that they had the match of France. In fact, they had the measure of France. They were the better team. They were flat out, I thought, the better team on the day.
Yeah.
But their inability to create real chances and Southgate's refusal to be brave, I think, hurt them. Like the substitutions, I don't know why Bukayo Saka was brought off, but Raheem Sterling's not a player who's opening up a defence by himself. Marcus Rashford, I understood bringing him on, but why wait so late to bring him on? What's he going to do in 5 minutes plus stoppage time? And he's not a player that's opening a defence by himself. I didn't understand why he made those changes. Mount came on and offered absolutely nothing other than he made one run into the box, and Theo Hernandez did about the stupidest thing you'll see at this World Cup. And other than that, Mount's only involvement in the game was to lash one a mile over the crossbar from 25 yards. Like, it was a game crying out for a little bit of bravery. You had control of the game. Once England scored, it was quite one-way traffic for a long, long spell. That's the time to try and seize the advantage. And if you're not going to bring on Trent, bring on Maddison and at least get somebody on the pitch who, is a world-class set-piece taker when you get a late set-piece on the edge of the box.
What this game reminded me of, to be honest, is a typical, let's say, like earlier this season when Liverpool played Spurs. That's what it reminded me of. A game like that where Spurs would have had stretches of possession and a few chances and looked like they were the better team, and maybe they could finally beat Liverpool, who have been above them in the table for the last 4 years, sort of thing. But Liverpool still won, and not that difficult to not lose for Liverpool. And in this case, France. France weren't the better team, but it still wasn't really, really difficult for them to avoid defeat, if you know what I mean. There's quite a big
100%
between not losing and having to win the game yourself. There's a big area of ground there, and I don't think that England did enough to make France be on the wrong side of that.
No, I don't either. I don't think they pressed home the advantages that they could have had. So overall, hammer Iran, disappointing performance in a draw with the USA, beat Wales quite comfortably, beat Senegal quite comfortably, and then go out to France. How would you rate that World Cup overall for England? Because I've seen some attempts to dress it up as, a really good run. talk of, Senegal AFCON champions, which is fair. They are AFCON champions, but it's worth pointing out that since 1970, no AFCON winner had gotten past the round of 16 in the subsequent World Cup. Many of them had failed to get out of the group stage. And in fact, many of them had actually failed to qualify for said World Cup. So I don't think it's actually a good measure. And especially when you factor in no Sadio Mane, their best player, no Keita Balde, who you highlighted before the tournament, an important squad player, no Idrissa Gana Gueye on the pitch, and no Cheikh Kouyaté on the pitch.
If I'm being totally honest, I factor the Senegal being African champions into the equation absolutely zero. Otherwise, just by the fact that England made the World Cup, it's already a big step forward because Italy, who won the European Championships, aren't there. That's nonsense. It makes no sense whatsoever. So, no, I don't factor that in at all in any way, shape or form. I would say the group stage was either par or maybe a couple of % better than par, just by the fact that they won 2 and drew 1 instead of the other way around, which is kind of what I expected, to be honest. That is tempered by the fact that later on, just like Costa Rica, just like a couple of other nations, Iran were really, really not prepared and undercooked in that first game. And you could see that by their reaction in the subsequent second and third group stage games. They were not at the races, to put it kindly. So I think England benefited a lot from that. If Iran of game 2 had have turned up instead of Iran of game 1, would England have ran out such comfortable winners? No, not a chance. Would England have run out?
They would have won the game, I think.
Probably would have won. But even that's not a definite. It's that it was it's very possible that they would have had that mentality of don't lose your opener, which a lot of even the bigger nations, supposedly bigger nations, took in the World Cup. So again, I think that England did benefit from that. The win over at Senegal, I would say, was good. The start was not good. The performance overall was good in the way that they completely took the game away from their opposition. And regardless of how good you think Senegal are or how impressive you think England were on the day, the fact is they did run away with that victory in quite a short spell of time. Exactly what you're talking about, the France one there, in fact, that England didn't do, they did do against Senegal. So I think that counts for quite a lot in a World Cup game, to be fair, especially a knockout match. We've all seen plenty of them even this year where the team on top goes ahead and then goes into their shell and protects what they've got, and it costs them big time. So England did positively there, I think. And like I said, I think it was a clear step forward in terms of how big a team they acted basically in the match, and how positive they were about fronting themselves up and being the better team and trying to be on the front foot and all the rest of them. I think all of these were very clear steps forward for England. But was it a clear step forward in tournament terms overall? It can't be, because you've gone out at the quarterfinal stage again. I accept that it was, against the world champions. That's fine. That makes it not embarrassing on the day that you've lost and all those kinds of things. But it still doesn't make it a progression in the tournament. You can't just say it's the equivalent of reaching the final, because it isn't. It will never be seen as the equivalent of reaching the final, even the semi-final. Nothing will show that in 40 years' time, whereas we still look back at the World Cups in 86 or something like that, and how England did there, or World Cup 1990 and England go through how England did progress there. We don't factor in the fact that we played a team who were so unbelievably good across that period of time that it counts as us being runners up. It didn't. We got to the semi-finals and then finished 4th. This is one step worse than that, and that's what it is. So it's a backward step for that, and across the whole tournament, I say par for England, nothing more than that.
Yeah, I think par is fair. I think the France performance was probably their best performance at the competition.
Absolutely.
I thought they had a bad first 30 against Iran, a bad first 60 against the Americans, a bad first 45 against the Welsh, and a bad first 35 against Senegal. And I thought, in terms of actually starting the game at a decent level, this was a step forward for England. But I mean, overall, the bottom line of it is that if they had lost to Senegal, it would have been seen as a disaster.
Yeah.
And there would have been mass criticism of Southgate and the players, and there would have been calls for him to go. So when I see Ollie Holt and people of his nature try and boost Southgate off the back of beating a very average Senegal team, when you factor in the players they were missing, including, by the way, both starting fullbacks from that AFCON, and the fact that Edouard Mendy has completely nosedived in terms of his form from where he was in January to where he is now. He's not even Chelsea's number one anymore. I think if they'd lost that game, it would have been a source of ridicule. So while I do agree with what you said about how when they got their goal, they went for the jugular and they rammed home that advantage. I do sort of feel like you can't, not you, but people can't big that game up too much, because if they'd lost it, it would have been a source of ridicule. So, a bit like, because I saw Gary Lineker agreeing with Ollie Holt, and I wanted to say to him, like, when you beat Cameroon in 90, you didn't pretend it was a great win. You just acted like that's what we should do because we're better than them. If you'd lost, Bobby Robson would have been publicly flayed. So, it's a good performance, but it's not a particularly great win. And I still maintain that Southgate's most impressive win in tournament football with England is a group stage game over Croatia.
Yeah, that might well be the case, to be fair. It will never be a memorable win, I will say that, because the penalty shootout against Colombia or the knockout win over Germany, something like that, is always going to stand out more because they are genuine moments, let's say, even if it doesn't really reflect the standing of those sides at that exact moment in time, which is obviously a tricky thing to do at the time. At the time, and obviously in knockout football, especially, emotion is kind of everything. That's how the match feels, and that's what makes things feel big. I will say also, just on the France match, that we had spoken about it in the build-up to the game, how England would react if they fell behind for the first time in the World Cup, and I thought they were very good with that. I thought it was quite a mature process, let's say, of getting themselves back in the game and getting themselves back to playing the way that they were before the goal went in and that sort of thing. Possibly there was an element of France doing the other thing of that and sitting back and looking to hit on the counter, obviously, but even so, England managed their own game of that quite well, I thought.
They did, and what they did really well was they didn't go away from what their plan was. They didn't open up and go at France.
No,
they kept it controlled, but it was a little bit like watching a David Moyes team. They did the exact same things. They just did them 10 yards further up the pitch and kept everything still as neat and tidy and as tight as possible, but, weren't leaving huge acres of space for Mbappe to run into. So it leads to the question, Karl. One thing I will say, I think two players that stood out to me in this tournament for England, other than Jude, who's the obvious one, I think this is the best international tournament that Harry Kane has had for England in terms of performances. But unfortunately, it's going to only be remembered for the fact that he missed that penalty. But on the topic of missing penalties, Bukayo Saka had a very good Euros, and all anyone remembers is that he missed a penalty in the shootout. But I thought Bukayo Saka, especially in that France game, put down notice that he is the starting right winger for England and will be moving forward. I thought he was absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he only had one not particularly good game in the whole thing, to be honest. All the rest of the time, I thought he was either the best or in the top 2 or 3 players for England for sure. It was only really the USA game, which was
where nobody plays well other than Kane, really.
Yeah. But yeah, he was. I was very surprised, like you, that he got taken off. Sterling, I could understand coming on, but as a finisher, not as an opener-upper, to say.
Yeah, and all of a sudden he's been asked to track back and help with Mbappe. Like, you're bringing him on, put him up next to Kane.
Yeah, the only reason I would have said Sterling could come on and do that job is if you're replacing Walker and try to go, like, basically extra winger, and Sterling, you just have to get back into position if you need to, kind of thing. But it wasn't really that kind of move. It wasn't that kind of substitution. So it was all a bit strange, to be honest. But as I say, I didn't really expect too much different in terms of the subs. I think those 4 who did come on, Rashford, Grealish, Sterling, Mount, I think the only other one I would have expected to come on there probably was Dyer or Phillips, because none of the others were really in and around the mix, sort of towards the knockout stages at all. So Southgate hasn't really deviated from anything that he's done. I think it was maybe even a bit of a shame he didn't just throw on like even a Callum Wilson for the last few minutes of the game or something like that. Grealish came on for John Stones after he went off injured. Like,
Yeah.
What's he going to do when it's packed out defence like that? He's not going to be picking the ball up in the areas really where he can do his thing and make something happen. So you may as well get another finisher on there and try to. It doesn't matter anyway. It was a slightly underwhelming injury time, I would say, in terms of what England actually managed to do. But
it seemed like the Kane penalty took all the air and life out of them.
Completely. 100%.
Like it didn't. Like, I know there was the Rashford moment with the free kick, but you know, and he came close. Like, let's give the lad his credit. He came close, but once that Kane penalty sailed over the bar, Jude ran straight to Kane to get hold of him and get his head back in the game. But everyone else, their heads visibly dropped. It was like there was a big sigh and all the air went out of them and they never really recovered. And like you said, extra time was very, very flat and a little bit disappointing. Surely you just throw Walker up front and just launch balls in at him. Or not Walker, Slabhead up front and just launch balls in at him from everywhere. If you're going to lose, you might as well lose 3-1, but go out on your shield. And that's kind of where I'm disappointed with England. But just the failure to actually commit to trying to win the game.
Yeah, I mean, there's, like I say, small things which could have been done differently and maybe would have made an impact or not. But again, if I refer back to like the sort of similarities between a Spurs and Liverpool match or someone like that, it's not really that often you even see Conte will chuck up a big centre back or something like that later.
Yeah, but it's different in the league, though. What's wrong with the World Cup quarter-final here?
I know. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm saying it's the similarity that I saw in this game.
Yeah. Southgate treated it like it was a league game, as if, well, if we lose, we'll just go again next week. And he needed more urgency. So, on the topic of Gareth Southgate, apparently he is going to take some time to consider his future. The FA seem very keen for him to stay. My guess is that he will stay. I think he will probably see out his contract until 2024. I think he might just take Christmas and relax with his family and recharge after the World Cup and how hectic everything has been. Do you think he should stay?
Only if he is open to, again, taking another step with England. And I preface that by saying, like, I think he has every single tournament. I think he has, not always at the times you would expect or the times you would want, or certainly not as quickly as you would want. But I do think that as a team, he has made England take steps forward in being better in many different regards each time they've gone out of a tournament. But you also got to realise that this group of players that you've been working with now, and it's kind of a second group of players now that he's on, they don't have that long. You know, there's probably one Euros for some of them, maybe a World Cup for some of them, maybe not. And then after that World Cup is like a third group, basically. The Bellingham, Foden, Saka group is going to be its own new group by that point when they're the leaders rather than coming into the team as such.
The post-Kane kind of era.
Yeah, so I think that he should stay if he is willing to make a couple of quite significant changes. And I'm not even necessarily talking about personnel. I am talking about personnel, but I'm not only specifically talking about personnel, more of that kind of maybe the decision making that we've just been speaking about, maybe the aggression or boldness to make certain substitutions in matches which are outside the scope of how things normally go, because quite a lot of nations have done that in the World Cup so far, I will say, and maybe that is a little bit of something that England could have taken on board and maybe could have done a little bit different. You know, it might not have worked, so it's not saying that that's the reason England are out or anything like that, but I do think that it was quite predictable that basically by the time we got to this stage, you're looking at a pool of 15 players who might contribute or not. And I don't really think that, you know, in an age where we now have 26 squad members, of course they can't all play and of course they can't always all come on a sub, but make use of the ones you've got at different times. Don't make it all about a group of, 15, 16, which is what we had at the Euros. It's what we had again now at the World Cup. I would like to see a bit more broad-minded approach in games, I think.
If we look at the England team that played the first game versus the England team that played the last game, The only change that he made was to bring Jordan Henderson back into the team over Mason Mount, because Walker was always going to come in once he was fit. Trippier was only really filling in. And Foden came into the team because Sterling had to go home. So I don't know that, like, I think he goes into a tournament with, this is what I'm going to do, and nothing is swaying him from that. I did admire the fact that he went 4-3-3 against France and didn't, absolutely, and didn't go to the back seven. But if we look ahead 2 years, the only players I think that won't be there are likely to be Kyle Walker and Jordan Henderson. And I think everybody else will still be there. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. In certain cases it is. But what are you saying to Trent? Like, well, hang on for a couple more years. You know, Reece and Kieran are going to be the right backs for the next 2 years. But then maybe you'll get your chance. And, you know, it just... A couple of others in the squad, like the likes of Maddison, like, that guy's been absolutely out of his mind for Leicester for 18 months, and he doesn't get a minute, not a second in the squad. You've got Fikayo Tomori, he's been unbelievable for AC Milan. He doesn't get a look in, so Connor Cody can go because he's good in the changing rooms. Like, this whole thing of wasting squad places on players because they bring something in the dressing room, I'm sorry, that's a nonsense. If you're bringing players, they need to be able to contribute. And there was not a situation in which Connor Cody was ever going to get on the pitch. So why not bring Tomori, who could actually, you know, improve your defence? I think these are the things he needs to look at. I don't know that there's an outstanding candidate out there to replace him unless you look outside the English pool, because Potter's not taking it. And Eddie Howe's not taking it. Not at this point. Maybe in a couple of years, but not now. And the other managers that you might look at, the likes of a Michael Beale, he's just taken a new job. Do you know? So, like, unless you're going for somebody really unproven, which, to be fair, is what Southgate was, there doesn't seem to be an outstanding English candidate. Unless, and you're not going to like this, unless they go to Sean Dyche. Now, what Sean Dyche is going to do is he's going to set England up to play like Morocco, but they'd be a more talented version of Morocco. Now, could a more talented version of Morocco win a tournament is the question. We haven't seen a team win a tournament like that since Greece in 2004. England would have an awful lot more talent than that Greece team, but I don't know that the English public would be all that open to that idea.
No, they wouldn't, and I don't think that they should be either. That's way too reductive for the international stage, considering the quality of players you would go up against on a regular basis. Like we've seen, this World Cup is not of a ridiculously high level. Either you're very, very good defensively and you lack a bit in transition play and you lack a bit in the final third, or you're good going forward, but you're not all that good defensively, or you have individuals who will cost you from moment to moment. You know, there's not a complete team at this World Cup. So I think,
but that's what I mean. Why couldn't you focus on being great defensively, knowing that, well, we've got Bukayo Saka, Phil Foden, and Harry Kane as a front three?
Because you remove the effectiveness of them being on the ball that often in the final third. You're asking them to do it in just a few minutes or a few occasions. I think that's way too reductive. And how do you plan to play that way at a tournament when you've got to go through 10 games of qualifying against Lithuania and Bulgaria and, you know, whoever else who is very, very third or fourth tier to actually get there? You can't just rely on Nations League to practice it.
Well, you're not going to be playing Nations League against anybody good because Southgate got you relegated. But
there is that. Exactly. Again, you can't practice it even more, then, can you?
But look, when did Morocco practice it? The guy took over a fortnight ago.
Yes, that's a very different kind of team building. I don't think that is the way England will go at all, and I don't think that that's the way they should go either.
You'd rather the heroic defeat than winning playing?
No, I would rather, if a different approach to Southgate's needs to be tried, I would be fine with that, but I would want it to not be the Sean Dyche way.
So, yeah, I get you. So more more of an Antonio Conte type of, in between sort of thing where, yes, you're built primarily as a defensive unit, but you can still play an attacking brand of football out of that?
Yes, I would want to be somewhere between, like, not as
So Pochettino?
Sorry?
Pochettino?
I mean, I think Pochettino would be an outstanding international manager, and I'll tell you why. Partly because obviously he's tactically very good, and that's important. But increasingly, I think that the best international managers, and I said this actually after the Euros, but I think this World Cup has again proven it to be the case. The best and most successful international managers are increasingly the ones who can be very, very good at team building. Basically, it's not about always necessarily finding the perfect system or the perfect way to let your one-star player take center stage or anything like that. It is about having a group who buy into your methods, of having a group who really believe and fight for each other. It's such a condensed thing and really, really intense, and more intense now in Qatar because it's more games closer together, blah, blah, blah. It's increasingly those nations who have spoken over and over again for like months and months now about how close the group is and how they all have a really good harmony and all the rest of it. It's not a surprise that these nations have gone as far as they have. And Morocco is a surprise, obviously, but turn it the other way around. It's not a surprise that going as far as they have clearly got one of the best group dynamics there. And again, that's been put together over a very, very short period of time. It's a much more intense kind of thing. I think Pochettino would be excellent at that. I would very much rather go Pochettino or even a slightly lower caliber of manager to him than for the style but lacking overall compatibility with the group of, let's say, Roberto Martinez, because he is very, very technique based, let's say, and can get you playing very, very good football, but only if everybody's on board. Otherwise, what's left there? As we've seen, nothing is the answer.
Well, he's failed with a far more talented group of players, so I think if Roberto Martinez gets the job,
yeah, but
everybody should just give up.
Just on him, it's that type.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But his name will, like, his name is going to come up if Southgate goes. He will be one that is mentioned. Let's move on then. England are gone, and it is what it is. They'll try again in 2 years at the Euros. We were going to look at some players that have probably played their last World Cup, but we don't have time. Who cares? They're out as well. Let's look at this game coming up on Tuesday night. It is Croatia versus Argentina. Croatia in a third World Cup semi-final in 6 World Cups, which is an incredible achievement for a country with less than 4 million people, versus Lionel Messi, who just does not seem to want to die in this tournament. And I think this game, Karl, will come down to that midfield, because Modric, Brozovic and Kovacic have been outstanding. But Enzo Fernandez, Alexis McAllister and Rodrigo de Paul have gotten better with each passing game. And I think that's where this game gets won or lost.
Yeah, I think there are 2 key things here. One is that midfield. And actually, this is a really good example of what I was saying about Southgate, because I don't think that Southgate would have made the changes that Lionel Scaloni has. We both of us have said we're not necessarily thinking that Scaloni is like one of the top managers in the world or anything like that, just because he's taken Argentina where he has, even if he wins the World Cup. But he has changed to solve problems that were there. And I don't think that Southgate actually took those steps in the game where it was needed, for example. So he changed the midfield around, he's changed one of his forwards around, he's coped with the fullbacks being changed around and that sort of thing. And he's made the tactical shifts where they've needed to as well. Just about working, I think, overall. I think Argentina's biggest strength in this has gone from the forward line in qualifying to the midfield line in the World Cup. Obviously, they've still got Messi, and that's its own thing. We don't need to clarify that every single time. But the midfield here has functioned so well as a unit on and off the ball that it has elevated, I think, what the rest of the forwards and the attacking players can do. I think if you look at the first couple of games and how, for example, at left back, Tagliafico really struggled in the first game, and Acuna, when he came in, was all right, but it wasn't like quite there, whether he was overlapping, whether he was able to go in attack all the time. But since then, he's been brilliant. I think Acuna has been one of their most important components. Not necessarily the nicest player always to watch, bit of a shithouse, quite moany, bit of a cheat sometimes, but he's been so key to their build-up play and then really good defensively as well. And all of that comes from the balance that they have in midfield. Croatia, on the other hand, have to have that balance in the midfield because that's what their team is. Like, they've got really good cover behind them from one defender. They've got really good outlet on one side of the pitch in attack, but all the rest is a little bit hit or miss. Like, Juranovic has been great and rubbish. Sousa has been good and completely missing. And it is really that midfield three which knits everything together for them. So tactically, I think this is a really, really intriguing game. I assume Argentina are going to go back to 4-3-3 rather than 3-5-2 from the quarterfinals, and I think that that's absolutely the right thing to do. If Otamendi and Romero cannot handle either Petkovic or Kramaric by themselves, then
they should probably just go home.
Retire, to be honest. Molina, I think Nahuel has had a really, really good tournament.
He's been great. Yeah, he's been great.
I think he's a great right back, and him against Perisic is going to be a really, really key battle there as well. So lots and lots to look forward to, I think, for this game.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. I think you're getting two of the great players of the last decade in Modric and in Lionel Messi. Arguably both their last World Cups, almost certainly for Modric. Messi could potentially hang around for one more. But, you know, this is World Cup royalty in Argentina versus this plucky, scrappy underdog in Croatia. This is a Croatian team that in the last World Cup overcame the odds time and time again, you know, dragged games to penalties, won penalties, dragged England to extra time, beat them in extra time. This time around, they dragged Japan to penalties and beat them. They dragged Brazil to penalties and beat them. And they've shown an incredible mental toughness that obviously comes from growing up in a certain part of the world where your people have been mistreated and hold memories of war and stuff like that, where it is like an innate thing. Survival is an innate thing. The RGs are the same. They've got that really strong mentality. They've even in the last two games where we've seen them wobble and we've seen them on the ropes against Australia and against the Dutch, they do just find a way to just about survive. And I think this is going to be a fascinating contest. I think you've got weak links on both sides defensively. I think Otamendi and Lovren are both capable of calamitous errors. You've got two goalkeepers that are in really good form. And if it goes to penalties, it's anyone's guess which of them comes up trumps. You've got questionable presences at number 9 for each team. Alvarez is doing okay, but I would say that's about it. And obviously we've seen the Kramaric, Petkovic mess that Croatia are dealing with up front. So it feels to me like it's going to be a really tight game, a really hard fought game. Argentina have just had a really, really hard fought game, which you'd wonder if they might have burnt a lot of emotional energy, especially in the kind of aftermath. If there was this big dump of adrenaline after the game and maybe they struggled to get started quickly next time out. But they've gone from strength to strength, having lost their opening game. Croatia, they're just like this slow-moving zombie that seem impossible to kill. I do think this has all the bearings, or all the makings of a really, really good World Cup semi-final.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very looking forward to this one, to be honest. I think it's the runners-up of 2014 against the runners-up of 2018, both of them trying to get to at least not be runners-up this time, but you couldn't really ask for two nations with more, not to prove, but, you know, reasons to try and go one further. Like you said, the fight and the unwillingness to lose that they both have is there. But also the capacity to cost themselves a loss is also there in both of those teams. There are quite a few similarities in them, to be honest. Like there's a couple of, I'm not going to say make weights, but certainly players who are performing functional roles tactically at the moment rather than being clear standouts. I would say there's probably at least two players who you could make a reasonable case for Argentina to be among the better performers in their position throughout the tournament. I would say Croatia have one who absolutely is, in Gvardiol. He's, I think, been in the top two centre-backs, so would be in any team as such. I just really like how this shapes up. It should be a lot of possession for Croatia. It should allow Argentina to hit on the counter. It should allow Argentina to be on the front foot at times and Croatia to look for an outball because they have like quite a very, very sturdy defensive line. So I think that this game will be swinging backwards and forwards. I don't think this is a game which necessarily has anybody dominating possession all the time. I think Croatia will just about edge that side of it, but not necessarily creating more than Argentina through it. So it could easily be a game which has a couple of twists and turns in terms of the scoreline. I don't think anything suggesting that Croatia go to extra time again is a surprise, but I actually think this one will be done in 90 minutes.
Do you? Oh,
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, I think there's good individual battles all over the place. I think there's players who are playing above themselves. I think Acuna is one. I think Juranovic is another. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if they come up head to head, especially when Juranovic just decides he's picking the ball up and going.
Acuna suspended.
Acuna is suspended. Oh. So Tagliafico.
Tagliafico at left back. And what's his name? Montiel is suspended as well. So it'll definitely be Nahuel on the other side as well.
Yeah. So, look, Montiel hasn't had a great competition. But Acuna has definitely made an impact since replacing Tagliafico, who just hasn't been particularly good for probably 2 years now.
Yeah,
he stayed at Ajax too long, I think, and he went from a player that was linked to Premier League clubs for 25 million to a guy that joined Lyon for I think 4 million. So no, that's it. So he needs a big showing, and if Juranovic is going to come rampaging down that wing, he's going to need to be alive to the threat because Brazil certainly weren't for long stretches. Right, let's do predictions and get gone. What is your prediction for this game? You think it ends in 90?
I do. Assuming Argentina go 4-3-3, which means Lisandro coming out of the team, and I'm going to pick Di Maria coming in to make it a 4-3-3. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Argentina win here. I think they will learn from previous mistakes, and if they do concede a goal this time, actually play some football, stand firm, and see out the 90.
Is there a possibility that Lisandro Martinez plays left back with Acuna out? Or does he not offer enough going forward, do you think?
Possibly doesn't. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a match they actually want Tagliafico to just sit and defend anyway. So could, but...
Because if Di Maria is playing left wing, which is possible...
I think he'll play right again.
I know, and he'll just end up doing the same crap all over again in the old man Arjen Robben game, cut inside and be really predictable. So you've got 2-1 Argentina. I want Argentina to win this game. I really do. I want Messi to get that final, because in the final anything could happen. And I think if France play the way they did against England, I think Argentina can beat them. I'm not sure if Croatia can beat France.
I don't want the same World Cup final twice in a row.
No.
For some reason, I don't want this.
No. I want Argentina to go through. I'm going to go the same scoreline as you. I'll go 2-1. This is the third time these teams have played in a World Cup, and each time they've played in a World Cup, Croatia have been in the semi-finals of a World Cup. So 98, 2018. But both times they've played were in the group stage. I remember met in the knockout phase. And both times that they've played at a World Cup, France have gone on to win the World Cup. So, and beaten Croatia to do so. They beat Croatia in the semi-final in 98, and then obviously in the final 4 years ago. I think Argentina will win this game, though. I think Croatia's journey stops here, and it wouldn't even surprise me then if they were to lose the third and fourth place playoff, which, spoiler, I think will be against Morocco. So, anything you want to add before we go?
No, just to say a quick thank you to everyone who has been listening to our World Cup Daily throughout the tournament, and hopefully, even if you've not been watching the tournament itself, you've enjoyed the updates, let's say, and possibly an overdue apology to my American friends if they didn't like my Greg Berhalter hatred.
Have you seen the Greg Berhalter
Yes,
Gio
but I'm
stuff?
saving that for our last one.
Perfect. That's a good one to keep. Rightio, we will be back tomorrow or Wednesday. I don't know when this is going out, whether it's going out Monday night or Tuesday morning, but we'll be back before the second semi-final, France versus Morocco, and then we'll figure it out from there. Talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.